It's a beautiful day here in the neighborhood. Spring's really getting going. Thought we'd show you guys around just a little bit as a general overview of what's happening here at the East Nashville Food Forest. So, this is the new bed we put together around these trees. We've got 2 plums, 2 hazels, hazelnuts, and 2 witch hazels. We're planning to cover this with soil and introduce at least some squash, if not some other things, to keep the grass out. And there's one more plum tree up there, and one more plum tree over there. This is a beautiful golden rain tree. That'll get so many blossoms that you can hear the pollinators from inside the house. On this corner, we've got some sunchokes growing here, a golden raspberry, some lettuces, radishes. Got some mullein planted in there. And 3, trying not to step on things. Got 3 brand new currants that we ordered from Honeyberry USA up in Bagley, Minnesota. Look like they're doing pretty nicely. 4 different varieties of blueberries. Some walking onions coming up here. Horseradish. Raspberry. This one, the deer keep it pretty nicely trimmed, but it's also a dwarf patio variety. I think it's called raspberry shortcake. And here, we haven't utilized this area too much yet, but we're trying out some cardoons this year, which will probably be mostly decorative. You can eat them as well, but we'll see if we can get them to grow first. I've killed a couple because apparently they don't like the direct Tennessee sun. This guy's not doing so great, but we'll see. I got a lot more to try out in some shadier, cooler areas. This is a wild elder that we brought up here from the forest. It might be a little bit too sunny for it. Remains to be seen. Got a lot of different stuff in these front beds. They get a good amount of sun, but they also get some shade from that golden rain tree in the afternoons, which helps some of these plants a lot. So we've got cucumbers, lettuce, ragged jack kale, pinto beans, some lettuce from overwinter, some fava broad beans. Here's some shiso or perilla that we're trying to grow, rosemary. This pea and this nasturtium really like living together, and this pea is so gorgeous. I don't remember the name of it, but it has these amazing purple flowers, and peas are delicious too. This one is almost as tall as me. It's pretty amazing. More lettuce. Arugula we're letting go to seed, so we have a supply for next year. Some failed experiment fennel. I had some going bad from the grocery store, but now it's just attracting snails, as you can see, so we'll need to get that out of there. This is a bay laurel I picked up from Bates Nursery here in Nashville. It's putting on a lot of new growth, doing amazing. Some old overwintered cabbage. Another failed grocery store experiment. The celery, I mean, it's alive, but it's not gonna probably produce anything. That's okay too. And here's one of those cardoons. As soon as it gets that sun, it really starts having trouble. Since we've gotten a lot of rain in the past couple days, our little channel that we've dug to collect some of the water has got a nice little supply in there. That channel runs all the way down around the corner of the house. Hopefully we can get a few of those dug to help control the water around our property in different areas and help us collect it so we can use it. Let's see, this is a brand new bed that our friends were not using. We kind of threw a bunch of random plants in there. Well, not random, but the starts that we really needed to get out into the yard. So you can see there's some eggplant, some basil, a few different peppers. I believe there's lychee tomato, maybe some ground cherry. I don't remember 100%. This looks like our moringa tree. It's my understanding that one season in Tennessee, these can get really tall, so that's probably going to have to move. What else is going on? We decided to fence in this area over here to protect our hazelnut trees and a few of the other things in here. They were just getting hit hard by the deer, and we wanted to give them a little breathing room so they could put on some growth. We've got a mimosa tree in the center here. That one is a nitrogen fixer. They're beautiful trees. They're kind of invasive here in Tennessee, if you want to call it that, but I wouldn't call it that. They like the marginal areas a little bit better, so we'll see how it likes it out here in the sun. Horseradish, sunflowers, and all along the edges we've got borage planted. I've heard some people say borage, but I think I'm going to stick with borage. There's a lot of different potatoes in here, onions, spinach. That's developing as well. Here's another mimosa tree that we pulled out of the garden bed. You find these wild all over the place in corners. This one's interesting because it's one of the purpley variety. And if you buy, more mature trees, these actually go for like over $100. So it's nice that you can just find them wild everywhere. Here's one of our favorite trees, one of our neighbor's favorite trees. That's a probably 10-year-old Japanese persimmon. They call it chocolate persimmon. I think it's maru. It's orange on the outside, and when it's fully ripe, it's nice and chocolatey brown on the inside. All right, one more mimosa tree in the corner, and azalea, of course. Most of the plants we plant now are going to be ones we can use or eat. And so this year we're going to transition this bed over into a bed with more edibles. Little lizard. If you watch the permaculture videos online, it seems like in every one someone has to use the word loaded at least once, so I'm going to go ahead and do that here. These 9-year-old blueberry bushes are just loaded with fruit this year. These bushes are beloved by the carpenter bees and other pollinators. This year I had some irises that I just kind of threw in on this corner, and we got a few blossoms. It was pretty nice. This is a fig. They were doing a renovation about 9 years ago down by 5 Points on Forest, and they had cut down this nice fig tree, and it was putting up a lot of root suckers. So I grabbed one and just tossed it in here, and this fig puts out a lot of fruit for us. It's been really nice. Now, most of these fruit trees are first year, so they're kind of getting going. James Prigioni on YouTube, he says with fruit trees, the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, the third year they leap. So I guess this is kind of a sleepy year for this Santa Rosa plum. Peach tree, North Star cherry. I don't think I'm going to take off all this fruit. Sometimes with the peaches I took off most of their fruit so they could work on their root structure. I think I'm just going to leave those. Some more sunchokes. This here is a nannyberry bush, viburnum. I've got a cardoon in there that's just barely hanging on for dear life. Here's another peach tree with a lot of nice new growth. And I left on these 2 peaches and they're looking really nice. I'm pretty actually happy that I did that. I can't get it to focus, dang. So that's what's going on with them. Now, over here in this bed, we thought we were gonna try and keep some of the goldenrod in here from last year, and it's really crowding everything else out, so we might have to do a chop and drop. But this is a Yapon holly, which you can roast and make tea. That's native to the southeastern United States. It's a lot like mate. We've got some wild hickory seedlings coming up in here, mostly planted by squirrels, I'd say. These lilies were here from the last owners of the house, and we have not moved those yet. Yarrow, bee balm, lemon balm, some other herbals in this bed. Now here's kind of the layout of the backyard. All right, so over here on the left is where we have all our garlic, and I'll show you the beds over there. We're about to fell this huge hackberry tree. It just keeps dropping limbs and it's gonna fall on this house. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to take that down probably in June after we harvest our garlic. But we should get a bunch of mulch out of the deal. And here's another garden bed that we salvaged from our friends. Needs a little shoring up, but we'll get that put together in the next couple days here. This concrete bed is so hot and sunny that you really gotta be pretty tough to live here. This is where all of our mushrooms were seeded, King Stropharia mushrooms, the wine caps. We did that in the fall, and we have gotten pounds and pounds of mushrooms. They're just huge. A lot of volunteer cilantro in this bed. We grew a bunch here last year. This is a loofah squash, and we've got some Malabar spinach way over there. I mean, look at these monster mushrooms. We got those from Henosis mushrooms here in Nashville. We got the spawn, and they have just been going like crazy. Look at these things. Let's see, a couple yuccas in here. These blue guys. I think they're gonna like it because it's so hot here, but they only grow supposedly about an inch a year, so. Let's see. Gala apple putting on a lot of new growth, mostly above where the deer can bite it. They've eaten all the lower growth, but that's fine. It'll keep on growing up there and it'll do nicely. Some wild blackberries that I found out in the bottom of the yard in the huge mess. Tried moving them up here to see how they did. Some more walking onions. Our currants are growing nicely. This one's a black currant. And I've heard that usually the deer don't like them, but they've eaten a good bit of this one, and especially the one that's farther down the hill. So your mileage may vary on that. This is a brand new hugelkultur style bed that we put in over the winter. We didn't do any weed suppression, and we didn't let the actual sticks that we put underneath totally die, so some of those are coming up as well. I might have done that differently. We'll do that differently next time. Sunflowers, kale, collards, carrots, onions, cilantro. We've got some baby corn coming up. Not baby corn, it's popcorn, but some new little life forms. Nice lettuce. This is a magnolia tree we planted. Now, that was probably 6 years ago. It may end up getting too big. We'll have to see what happens with the shade on that. We've got another main garden area over there. Here we've got a brand new rhubarb. Let's see, where are you? We got this guy from Stark Brothers, and it's been doing really well. Here's a view of the area we fenced with some new beds to keep the deer out. And I forgot up here there were a couple new things. A rhubarb that's doing really well. Putting off a lot of new growth in there. And this is a bush cherry that I planted. If I can avoid accidentally mowing over it, then that should grow a bunch this year. This is our quote-unquote greenhouse area. We have some friends who do high-end draperies, window treatments, and they had a hookup for all this plastic. Now, it does blow in the wind, so we've got to build a frame before next winter, but it helped us keep a lot of plants alive in here over this winter. And some hostas from the last owners. My tea-berry didn't do very well in here. I guess maybe it's still alive, but we'll have to revisit that at a later time because they almost all died in this little spot. Meyer lemon, a Camilla sinensis tea plant. And here's our shelf with where we kept all our starts to kind of harden them off. We still have some stuff we need to get out or give away, but it went pretty well this year. These are all cardoons that I need to figure out a place for. I let my blueberry cuttings die this year. I was very disappointed in myself. You take one trip out of town, I get too dry. Another cardoon. This is some chamomile that's going. And this cattle panel here is our new trellis that we set up. There were a bunch of euonymus bushes in here that we decided we had to take out. So we seeded the area with wildflowers and some red clover and some buckwheat. So hopefully that will like it there, and then we can decide what better to do with this area in the future. But in this bed, we've got a grapevine on each corner, some more walking onions, beans, tomatillos, beans, tomatillos, Arctic kiwi that seems to really like it here. Of course, hackberry seedlings anywhere you go in Tennessee. Anise hyssop. I've also got some maypop, some passion fruit seeds in here. We'll see if those come up. And there's that other grapevine. Oh, and I planted some hops rhizomes too. Now, hopefully, some of these plants can use this trellis to really climb up about 8 or 9 feet. Along this edge, we've got various things. Strawberries, tomatoes, kale, a lot of carrots, peppers, and this stuff's all in grow pots, which is kind of a experiment we're wanting to get into. What can be grown really well in grow pots. That way they're movable. We also realized you can use them to shade out all these grass and other plants from the bed, so as we move them around, we'll be able to kill the stuff that we don't necessarily need in here, and then hopefully we can turn it into a nice mulched bed soon. Got a lot of raspberry canes, and there's one blackberry in here, this guy right here. Some busting strawberry blossoms. And the stuff is getting kind of choked out, but it'll be okay. I have a bunch of sunflowers, hops, and other stuff planted on this corner as well. All right, what do you have going on in this fenced area?
All right, I just did a tour not that long ago, but things are changing really fast. So I've got the wall of keys right here, and different interplanted annuals underneath, lots of different kinds of beets and cilantro, lettuce, tomatoes, spinach, and tomatillos and peppers around the edge of the whole thing. And almost every single container with something like a tomato in it also has a pea plant or a peanut plant in it too, so that the legumes can be the nitrogen fixers in the situation. And everything looks really good so far. In here you can see we've got some little kohlrabi friends looking good. They have peas in there too, and later in the season we'll have some squash coming out of there. Over here, I don't think I've talked about this. Well, first look at the beautiful glowy calendula has just taken off. Looking really pretty. So hopefully we get a lot of calendula, and maybe we could use that in crafts or for, stop it, cabbage moth. Do you see this cabbage moth disrespecting me like this? No, it's not a big deal, but cabbage moths are definitely a thing around here. This one is probably trying to lay eggs on all of my kohlrabi and kale, and then the eggs will hatch and the little worm caterpillar guy will munch on my kohlrabi and other brassicas. I got a bunch of cilantro in here, a ton of peas. We love eating peas.
What are these little guys in here?
Oh, we've got some potatoes that I had bought from Oikos Tree Crops. And so they're supposed to be like super cold hardy potatoes, and I actually thought one of them had died, so I just planted some basil in there, but it didn't die. It was just waiting, so that guy's in there with all the basil, so we'll see how that goes.
These are some peanuts just coming up. Peppers. Do you remember what kind of peppers these are? Jalapenos. Golden beets and red beets coming up. Our lone ginger that we got to sprout. They need a really long growing season, so we might be able to finish those up inside. We're gonna have to see how all that turns out. And that's some lemongrass. All right, now that we've looked at this fenced in area, I'll swing you over here to what will be hopefully a nice compost pile one day. I'd like to hide that so it looks a little better visually, and we'd like to fence in this area with our chickens that we're planning to get. We've got a coop in the process of being moved over here. We'll probably put it right up next to this shed. There are a lot of predators around here, so we need to make sure it's a really bulletproof coop, and we'd like to have them be able to be fed from these food scraps that we add here from the restaurant, from our household. And we'd like to have two slots to have that finish up. This is an area we haven't done much with yet. I've got to move all this brush and maybe do something with these bushes, but There's the terraced area, of course. Can move on down the hill. We've only had the southern lot here for less than a year, and we're trying to make some moves to fill it out, but it just takes a lot of time. All right, over here we've got 2 old pear trees, and they are underneath that big grandma pecan tree. And those all put off a lot of fruit. They're really nice. Let's see, over here is where I stuck a honeyberry plant. This is from Honeyberry USA again, up in Minnesota. Remains to be seen how they'll do here in Tennessee. It's a little bit too hot for them. I've heard these are originally from Siberia, maybe northern Japan. But they don't like it hot, so I've put them in the shade. We've got a few raspberries coming up in here. I put those in probably about a month ago. A couple other raspberries as you go down the way. And one more honeyberry of a different variety that seems to be leafing out nicely. It has been cool weather recently, so we'll see how they handle the heat. The whole yard is filled with this really nice clover. I try not to mow it all down at once. I kind of mow in shifts, if you will. The deer really love to eat this. We're trying to give them an area from that side of the tree all around here and all the way down to the bottom there. We're gonna let it grow into a meadow scenario and see what happens. We're not really sure exactly what will happen. Obviously, grass will be longer, but in my neighbor's yard, you can just see it back there. There's a super nice old chestnut. And so we've tried to cross-pollinate that by putting in some younger chestnuts here. In a few years, hopefully they're flowering. This one the deer really like to eat, but it's still putting on new leaves, so it'll be fine once it grows out of the range of the deer. Here's one of the chestnuts we ordered from Edible Acres. Great YouTube channel, good nursery. It's the first thing we've ever ordered from them because they're so far away. All right, this is the oldest section of the garden. This raised bed up here, we put that in probably 8 or 9 years ago and kind of left off from gardening until the last couple of years. You can see we've got a lot of different stuff all over the place. Here's some garlic. We have that planted all over the yard. Probably 100, 150 heads of garlic that'll come up probably in June. Some random brassicas. A rosemary's hiding in there. Here's some Bocking 14 comfrey we're trying. Probably is a green mulch if we let that spread, or if we deliberately spread it. Some nettles growing in here. These are a lot of our herbs. This area is going to end up changing because we've got to bring down that big hackberry tree and it's going to fall right on this entire garden. There's no way around it, so we'll try and be as prepared as possible, and once that's down we'll have even more light here and we'll be able to reimagine. These parsnips are doing really well. You can always build better soil. This is a new trellis. I think originally this bar was for a swing to kind of look out over the hill and the nice view that we have here. We tried to dig it up, but we couldn't. That was back in 2012. So now we're using it for a trellis. It's actually come in really handy. This Bradford pear is really old. Not one I would normally install myself, but it does provide some food and pollination. So we'll let it be there until it falls apart, as most of them usually do. I'm coming over here because there's a little oak tree I tucked way back in here that popped up. There's not very many oaks on our property, so I'm trying to save any that I find in the lawn. It's got a lot of coverage, but this whole box elder will be coming down soon, and there's a large couple of hackberries over there and a locust that'll all be coming down. We do have a lot of black walnut on this property. It's hard to see. Here's the trunk of it. We have black walnut in all the woods, and some other plants don't like growing with it because it puts off a chemical juglone that suppresses the growth of other plants, but some of them are just fine with it, and we're just experimenting with that. Here's a bed that our neighbors built, friends of ours. They built it as a quarantine bed, I think, last year, and this year they were pretty much too busy to use it. So we've got some peas. After those are done, we'll chop them down in mulch, and we're gonna install kind of our leftover tomatoes and pepper starts that we haven't been able to put out yet in here. Looks like we've got another mimosa tree volunteer in here. Always happy to see that. Whenever I find those, I plant them around the yard because they are some of the first to come in and regenerate degraded land. They're beautiful trees. They grow really quickly, and I've heard they can fix some nitrogen. So you can let them grow, or you can chop and drop them for mulch. So this portion of the hill is fairly steep. We don't usually use it for play as far as the kids are concerned. So we've attempted to turn it into a little bit of an orchard type area. Bartlett pear, Wolf River apple, Orient pear. There's a small peach tree back there. I believe that's Red Haven. Currants. This is an old pear tree that puts off a lot of fruit. It is not the most delicious fruit, and it is senescing. It's entering the end stages of its life. But we've got these other pears installed so close so they can take over when that one finally falls. Contender peach, Kiefer pear, another pear that I forget, Black Arkansas apple. And here's another strip that I'm hoping not to have to mow so much. With this huge tulip poplar right here, it's definitely hard to get. It throws a lot of shade around and kind of dominates the area. That one, along with this giant sycamore back here where all the turkeys sleep at night. Beautiful trees. I wouldn't want to lose them, but they cast a lot of shade, and we definitely have to work around that. Now here's a bare root tree, a pear we planted last year. It was chomped straight to the ground by the deer, but it's popped back nicely. A lot of times these bare root trees will take off a lot better than a potted tree that you buy. And they're probably used to getting chomped by deer just in a natural environment. So it kind of makes them spread more branches and grow a little more vigorously. This one we companion planted with a pea and some garlic. We do that a lot around just to see what plants like each other. We're liking the tomato and pea combo recently. This pear, I believe this is another Bartlett. It just has so much growth, new growth this year. We planted this probably in November. and it's just taken off. This grove is mostly black locust over here, walnut, hackberry. Got some nice mulberries peppered in here. This one's a mulberry. They all kind of crowd each other out. So this year, most of the locusts seem to be falling down and coming to the end of their lives. So I'm gonna look for all my seedlings down in this area that I see every year, and I'm gonna try and propagate some of those. This is the remains of an old beehive we used to have. Bees ran away. But we have a few sunchokes growing right here. The bottom of the hill is an area of very, very heavy deer browse. In fact, you can see this sugar maple is a gift from a friend, close friend, and I didn't get it put in the ground for a couple years, and so I threw it down here in the woods, and the deer have just mangled it. It'll probably tough it out, but they are not giving it any rest. These deer love to eat. This wire fencing is my neighbor told me is an old baseball backstop they used to use in the 50s and 60s when they were kids. We've been using it as a compost area for a long time. Now we've switched most of our compost up to the top of the hill where it's easier to access. But it's still going. We still use this as mulch or sometimes finished compost. This is an area with a lot of elders that I've tried to protect with this wire. They usually don't grow very well down here for some reason, but we're gonna see if we can hang on to a few of those. At the back part of the property is a drainage, I guess you'd call it. It's usually dry, but after periods of heavy rains, it can get quite a flow going in it. We've had a good bit of rain recently, and so you can see we've got a good bit of water going down here. This area is just pretty wild. We let the deer have that. We've let some multiflora rose proliferate. I know it's really invasive, but since it's here, we're gonna try and get some rose hips off it. They're supposed to have really good nutrition. You can use them in tea. So, black walnut, a really old mulberry tree here that puts off a lot of fruit. Back in this ditch, we've got a lot of Osage orange, hackberry, walnuts, and box elder, which a friend of mine was just telling me is a very ancient tree. It's very interesting. I've also seen people make syrup out of it, as you would a maple, sugar maple. All right, here's my service berry, Saskatoon, that I just planted. It's another one that does really well in cold climates. I think it'll do okay here in Tennessee, but it's brand new, so it remains to be seen. And this one has been planted next to all these raspberries, but as you can see, the deer eat all the new growth on these, so might not be their favorite spot. We're just trying everything. Brush wall that we're in the middle of constructing. It's gotten pretty overgrown with weeds, but we'll get to it when we have the bandwidth. The plan is to prop it up with these old metal poles and old galvanized plumbing that we ripped out of the house because we needed to replace the plumbing. As far as I can tell, this fenced area was an old grape arbor from the original owners of the house, and it's an area of heavy deer browse, but this has all just been recently cleared out as of last spring. In here, we've attempted to build a new hugelkultur bed. It's not nearly finished. It's only compost on top of there, but we're planting some squash to try and keep the grass out. This is blue Hubbard squash, and it's supposed to be very pest resistant. So we'd like to establish this as a nice horseshoe shaped bed that eventually runs around here, and we'll take out most of these trees, if not all. There are some mulberries that we'll see if they bear fruit, and we've got some walnuts in there. We'll either pullard or take those out entirely. Just some other seemingly, we've tried a lot of different things down here. Here's a American persimmon that I ordered from Cricket Hill Garden in Connecticut. You can also find those around here. We're trying to plant some from Beeman Park over in northwest Tennessee. This is a viburnum. This was chomped back by deer, and it's got probably over a foot of new growth since I protected it. Once it gets tall enough, it'll be able to go on its own. Butterweed. We have a lot of butterweed, wingstem, and Philadelphia fleabane that grows naturally in this area. Here's a wire ring from the original owner. I tried putting a honeyberry in there. Again, those are also called hascaps, but we'll see how they do. They might not like how hot it is here. That's why I've planted them pretty much in full shade. But it's all an experiment. Here's an aronia that we planted. A lot of nice new growth on there. Another honeyberry down in here, and garlic, companion planting. This stump put off a nice lion's mane last year. I'm still waiting to see if that happens again this year. Stand of sycamore. These are all babies, of course, from this giant guy, Grandma. We probably won't keep most of those. It's good to have a few saplings around because the deer like to rub their antlers, and if you have some decoy trees, then they tend to avoid the ones that we chose to install. Here is a American beautyberry bush that's doing really well. I got this one from Bates Nursery, and they have clusters of strikingly purple or pink berries. They're edible. I don't think they're choice, but we'll try eating some of them, and hopefully some of the wildlife do too. All these are ailanthus in here, which is kind of a reviled tree, but all this, we cut these down last year knowing that they would resprout, and it's grown probably 12 feet last season. So what we're planning to do is let those continue, and we'll chop them down to use as fencing or trellising, and we can use that as a renewable resource. We also, last year, found that these passion fruit vines popped up here. We don't know if they're from bird droppings or if these were growing here as part of the last original owner's garden, but they did put off a lot of fruit. And these ailanthus are very good trellises for them. There's another one over here. The fruit's delicious. We saved some seeds, but for some reason we didn't look it up and didn't realize they need to have periods of cold to stratify over the winter. And so this year we will do that, and then they'll come up this year instead of having to wait a whole extra year. The only other, excuse me. The only other thing that's growing in here are these common blackberries that just are growing wild. There's quite a few right in this area and right over here. Last year we let them grow up. They were mostly eaten by deer, but some of the primocanes survived, and so hopefully they'll be putting off some fruit again this year, or for the first time for us. Another persimmon, American persimmon seedling. I've got some hops planted at the base of this pole that was just existing when we got here. These are some pawpaws we put in last July or August, I want to say. And I've heard they're a little bit slow to get going, but we've got a good few inches of new growth, and in the next few years we should be seeing some fruit from those. Parsnips, beets. A lot of this gets hit pretty heavily by the deer, but we do have some lettuces and arugulas and stuff going to seed that we'll keep the seeds from. Another pawpaw. Here's a pecan that we put in 4 years ago. And it's doing pretty nicely. This is the tree where we figured out that the deer like to rub their antlers, but I think it's gonna make a pretty full recovery because it's been growing nice and strong. Another garlic in there, just for fun. We've been protecting it with these hardy orange. We think they're rootstock for citrus trees that died and the hardy orange started to grow. But they've been fairly effective at keeping the deer off. This will be kind of the last area I show you. Volunteer sycamore that was cut back to the base and regrew over the past 4 years or so. So we're making a little cluster with a Liberty apple. I guess I'll let this one little fruit grow. This is a Liberty apple, supposedly very disease resistant. Another pawpaw coming in nicely. Cornelian cherry. We've got a yellow one of those coming in the fall that I'm excited about. And this is our other chestnut from Edible Acres. That's pretty much the whole spread. Hope you enjoyed this tour. That's what's going on at the East Nashville Food Forest. We'll see y'all next time.